If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell icon to get the latest updates.
So today we will have obviously some hands-on in the organization structure setup. But before that, I would like to spend some few minutes on what is the org structure for TM. And when you are setting up the organization structure, please note that the org structure, whether you are setting this in your S/4HANA or whether you are setting it up in standalone, the organizational structure always remains the same. There is no difference in the setup in the content level whenever you're setting up TM for any of the components. Okay. So before coming into the org structure setup, so I'd like to know what do you understand by organizational structure? Anyone who would like to have provide an overview why an organizational structure is required? Just based on your experience in the ECC component, why do you feel it is required? Anyone?
Yeah, so like any business organization, from a business point of view, will have multiple departments, say purchasing or accounting, account section, marketing, sales, and HR department, etc. So when we are mapping any kind of business onto any software, this is where the org structure comes into the picture. It somewhat maps the business functions to the SAP landscape, and that's how we have when we talk of the org structure, and then that's how we have the different business functions like market, like materials management, finance, and then within that we kind of want to set up what is the company, how many plants are there, what are the company codes that we kind of and things like that. So we try to map the business onto the SAP from a base point of view. Base to begin.
Correct, you're right. So if I say in a way, like different elements of an organizational structure are actually used to map an enterprise operational framework and different functions of your logistics and financial processes occur, right? So an organizational structure also allows you to create some models which is actually applicable on a legal, geographic, or for organizational boundaries for different components of your enterprise. Okay. So through the enterprise structure setup, the framework is built, and within that framework, all the different applications, transactions, execution of transactions, processes occur. So it is very important to know what are the different organizational structure we set up in TM. Now there is a thing what you need to know when we talk about organizational structure in SAP transport management. There are two components we talk of. One is your internal org structure. Okay. So these are the org structure which you actually basically set up when doing any type of transportation management system setup, as well as also we have the master data component, which is although segregated from the organizational structure, but all different master data is very interconnectedly linked with different organizational components in TM. So that's why when we are talking about organizational structure, we talk about the internal organizational structure, which represents the organizational entity, as well as we'll also come up with the different master data, which makes up the entire organizational structure. So today we will mainly focus on the organizational structure, which makes up the enterprise framework for TM. Now, if you see in this particular org structure component, there are three important roles what we see. Okay. So one from the perspective of selling, one from the perspective of purchasing, and one from the perspective of planning. So whenever you are working for any shipper scenario, okay, so that means where your core processes are created in your ECC system, where you have your orders or deliveries in place. There we need to have purchase org and planning execution org. Okay. The reason why I come into this, why we need this, and when you are working for an LSP scenario, LSP means a freight forwarder industry scenario. At an order management level, we need the sales. Okay. So when you are doing for a shipper, especially in S/4HANA also, we don't need any sales organization at that point. But if you are working for an LSP, at the order management level, we need a sales org as well as the purchasing and the planning based on the execution and the planning process. Now, what are these different components? See, why sales organization is required. So if you think about a freight forwarder industry, so freight forwarder industry means like LSP industry, whose main business is transportation. They want always to sell their transportation service. So if you call up DHL or FedEx, and if you are transporting goods from Germany to US, what do you want to do? You would like to basically contact them because DHL, FedEx sells transportation service. So that's why when you are implementing TM for a LSP scenario, the triggering point is your forwarding order, not the standard sales and delivery process. And in a forwarding order, sales organization is required because the main objective of sales organization is to trigger the selling activities within the organization. Okay. When you are coming to a shipper scenario, in a shipper scenario, basically as a shipper, we are not selling anything. Okay, so leave aside the commodity part because commodity procurement or selling is not part of transportation business, right? So when I'm implementing TM for a shipper, I am actually procuring or purchasing the service from the carrier. So because we are purchasing the service from the carrier and we are not selling anything, that's why in shipper we need purchase org and purchasing group, that is another entity which is actually being used to support our procurement of the services. Okay. Similarly, when you want to plan anything, when I say plan, that means my shipper is planning the transport. So even if it is internal fleet, they would like to plan that. And if it is external fleet, it will be the carrier or the third party will be doing the planning. But in case you are also doing your planning within the particular enterprise, you may use planning and execution organization. This is not a mandatory thing. It is not a mandatory that you need to have planning execution organization. You may still skip the creation of it. But sometimes many of the companies want to have this organization because the main objective is to, have a body which will perform the transportation planning on behalf of the shipper. So that's why the planning and the execution organization is there. So there are two components to that. I just make it in a notepad. For example, so when we create any organization structure, okay. So first of all, from the sales perspective, we have sales org, and you can also create sales office and sales group. Okay. From the purchasing perspective, because you are procuring the services from a carrier who will be responsible for doing the transport, you have purchasing org and purchasing group. Okay. And when you are having the planning, because as I told you yesterday, the transportation planning is a very important component of your planning process. So when you will be doing a planning, so you will doing a planning execution org and planning execution. Okay. So why this org and group is there? Organization is actually that particular entity which does the planning. And group means mainly for reporting purpose. They generally monitor whether the organization is doing the planning properly, and accordingly for the reporting capabilities and all, the purchasing group is there. Similarly, purchasing organization has a direct relation to the carrier because a purchase org negotiates with the carrier how much they have to be paid for the transportation prices, right? Because when a carrier is picking up the goods and delivering it to the customer location, he will charge certain amount to pick up the goods and deliver. So for that, purchasing org is that entity who will negotiate with the carrier. So a freight agreement has to be there. So when a freight agreement is there, based on that agreement, the carrier will charge you. And in order to build up the freight agreement, it is a purchasing org who actually negotiates with the carrier on the rates and the validity. And purchasing group is the group of people or group of buyers who are responsible for monitoring the entire purchasing process. Similarly, I think all of you are mainly from SD background, so you must be knowing what is the functionality of sales office sales. Okay. So any question on the definition of the org structure? Clear to everyone?
So when you say purchasing organization, you are saying we are going to place a PO to the carrier, right?
Yes.
So in cases where you said the carrier would not be a third party, in that case, this might not be needed. Is that the case?
No, it's not a PO to a carrier, it's a FO to the carrier, freight order. Okay, because freight order is a shipment document. So when we are creating this purchase of purchasing group, basically we need to have a reference of your ECC. Why I tell you? The reason is when you are creating a purchasing of, you are creating an agreement with the carrier. Based on the agreement, you will have the charge calculation in your freight order, right? And once the charge calculation is there in your freight order, you create a settlement document. So that is the process I discussed yesterday, if you recollect. Now, once you are posting the settlement, it will create a service PO so that the invoicing can be done to the carrier. Now, as you know, for a service purchase order, we need a purchase of and a purchasing group to be there in a service purchase order, right? So you need to map or refer to any ECC purchasing of when you are creating the purchasing of in TL. So that later on, this purchasing of and this purchasing group can be referred to when you are creating a service PO and service entry sheet in your ECC part on the after the posting of your FSD happens. I repeat one thing here, please don't mistake the purchasing of purchasing group which we do for your commodity procurement. That should not be the same one which we should use for purchasing of purchasing group for the transportation. So during any type of blueprinting phase or when you are doing any requirement gathering, it's a recommendation or suggestion that please segregate the purchasing of for transport companies separate to that of the commodity purchase. Because commodity is something you are procuring from an external supplier, and here you are procuring the services. So one is the service, one is the actual procurement. So it should be differentiated based on the purchasing. Okay, so that's why suppose in your particular project, if you are working with 10 different purchase of, try to create an 11th purchase of which will primarily be used only for transportation process and not for commodity procurement. Is it clear?
Okay.
Clear to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Now, before I just begin this, so suppose I am a transport company, okay, or rather the shipper has a transport company. So whenever a shipper is doing the transport, basically he has the tendency or he would like to basically book all the transportation cost into a specific GL account, right? And whenever you want to book the cost to a separate accounting process, you need a company code to validate whether the reconciliation is going to happen at the end of the year. Okay, so this company code basically can refer to any existing dummy code of ECC as well, or you can leave it as it is. Okay, so I have to show you what I mean by that. So this is my TM system. In order to create any organizational structure, so I have not specified here company organization here. Okay, so this is all the part which you have, but you can also create a company organization on the top. So that this is the umbrella, and under this umbrella, the entire sub entities are there. So for example, in your particular shipper company, you have two branches. One branch is taking care of your entire procurement part. One company ID is taking care for the entire selling part, and another company ID is taking care for the entire transportation, so that they can book the transportation cost in a complete different books of account. Because in the year end, some of the companies want to have a reconciliation separately your transportation cost with reference to your procurement cost. Okay. So that's the reason why you can create a company or you may not create a company. But I will show you with reference to the creation of a company. Okay. Any questions so far? Any questions so far from anyone?
No question. We can move ahead.
Okay. So in order to create your enterprise structure, the transaction code is PPOCE. So please note SAP TM is a web-based product, web UI product. Okay, the user interface technology framework is completely different as compared to ERP. So the transactions to create the screens which you'll see is little bit different as compared to the standard ECC GUI screens. Okay, so this is the transaction which we use to create your specific organization structure. So the transaction code is PPOCE. I click on create. And when I click on create, system will ask me for which date to which date you want to create your organizational object. I say I want to create it from till 9999. That means at the end of the entire SAP system. Okay. So my scenario is, so this is the scenario I am talking about, where my objective is that my transportation should start from Germany and it should end in US. Okay. And the intermediate locations are the ports. Okay. So in case my transportation is starting from Cologne and is ending at Chicago, so I am planning to create my company organization who is responsible for doing the shipment at Germany only. Okay. So that's why I will create, when I will be creating the nomenclature, I will create with Germany nomenclature. So first of all, I want to create a company organization. So I give a nomenclature, for example, company code. So this is a free text. You can give any name. Okay. So please note this organizational ID which I'm providing is not actually used in your TM business documents. I'll show you which documents, which number is used in TM document. So so for example, company of shipper in DE. And then when I go into the org data, you will see a number got created 500854. Okay. So this number is the number which will create, which will be used in your different business documents. Okay. And when you will be creating or using this organizational ID, see right now we have not specified whether it's a company org or whether it's a purchasing org or something. So in order to have that, we click on this create button. And when you are creating on the create button, it will ask for the function and the role. So my function is company and my role is organization. Okay. I click on this create button. And when I click on this create button, you will find that there are screens which will help you to enter some values. So this value which you see, BHG org unit. So this BHG org unit is the ECC references part which you can do. So for example, if you want to refer to any ECC company code which needs to be linked for your reconciliation purpose with reference to TM, this is the BSG, Business System Group. BSG stands for Business System Group Organizational Group. So here you need to maintain the ECC org unit which you can refer to. So now, if you want to create or refer to your ECC, you can always go to the enterprise structure. You can go into the definition. You can go into the logistics, financial accounting part, and here you can specify which company code you are going to use. Okay. So suppose I'm going to use this company code for my creation of my data. So you can always go here and you can put in the data here. So that means I'm referring this particular company code in order to create my data or rather create my company organization in my transportation management system. Okay.
So when you say reference, is it something like whatever I'm selling through SG01 company, the transportation will be taken care by this?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So only it will be always one-to-one relationship only, is it?
So this company, this org unit cannot be used in any other company org. It will be will say that this is already being used. So it is always 1:1.
Okay.
Okay. And then here you need to enter the business system group. So business system group means what? So I don't know, do any one of you have an idea about SLD, system landscape directory concept? Anyone have any idea? What do you mean by system landscape? Okay, I'll show you where we configure this. So basically what happens whenever you are using transport management or warehouse management, any system, okay, basically it's there, the system landscape directory should be set up. So that means I need to create a group name. For example, it's for example, it's TC1. Just want to give an example. So the business system group will be TC1, but within that business system group, which are the logical systems you are connecting to that business system? That's what we need to mention. Okay. So I can, that means the entire landscape, that means which is the sender, which is the receiver, all the, the system which are clubbed together and do the data exchange between two systems is covered under the business system group. So business system group data is actually created by the basis. So this will actually help you to link the source and the receiver, and also the entire team will know which systems are actually considered in your particular landscape. So under one business system group, you can connect multiple logical systems. So I'll show you that in the configuration after I configure this. So that is a basis activity, and that is always part of the system landscape preparation, which you need to do. So I have created one business system group. In the drop down, you can actually see it. Okay. And apart from the function and the role, you can also use a currency. So why currency is required? Currency is required because you need to know that whenever in the year end, whenever you want to do any reconciliation, in which currency my company organization should reconcile. So there should be a group currency, right? So that currency will be used as the basis for doing a reconciliation. In addition to that, there are two other important functionalities which you have. One is called as an intra-company settlement, and another is called as a group logistics company. So these are quite added or advanced features of TM, whereby what happens, suppose, so I'm talking about group logistics. Suppose you have got, within a particular organizational umbrella, you have got three different units. One taking care of logistics, one taking care for selling, and the third part is taking entirely for transportation. So that transportation company, so if I have TC as the group company, then TC1 is for procurement, TC2 is for selling, TC3 is for your transportation. So this TC3 is actually responsible for doing the transportation for TC1 as well as TC2 as well. Okay. So for that, we have the option whereby SAP says, if you want to set up such type of scenarios, then we consider the TC3 setup as a group logistics because they are responsible for doing the logistics for the entire group entity as a whole. Okay, so that is called as a group logistics company simply. And once you have maintained this data, the last data what you need to maintain is the address tab. So within the address tab.
Sorry, Viren, just one question on the previous tab.
Yes.
So we define the currency at multiple places, right? Company code at client level as well. So if we don't specify any currency in org data, then which is the default one it takes?
It will take based on the country code. So if you are giving Germany, it should take on the euro.
And okay, not based on company code, is it?
No, I'm talking about because in any company code you have to maintain the the country, right? From which country the particular company code and all exists, right? So if you are maintaining the particular country there, okay, based on the country, that default currency will be picked up. But I will always recommend please put the currency in.
And what it is, if it is different from what we have mentioned in company code? So in company code it's USD, but here I'm using euro. So will it impact?
See, ultimately what will happen? Ultimately, this is used in two cases. One in your freight agreement, and secondly in the reconciliation when you are transferring the payments for the invoicing. So whatever currency we use, ultimately when you are creating a freight agreement, there is a field where you can actually specify which currency we should use for payment to the carrier. Okay, so that is called as a document currency. So ultimately that document currency will be used for payment to your carrier and doing the invoice. Okay.
Okay.
So for example, if you are putting it here, DE, okay, you can put the city name here. You can also put some regions here. And you click on the save button. So these all other fields what you see is not applicable for us because this same transaction is being used by HR module where the human resource part needs to be taken care as part of the working time, as part of the accounts assignment. So nothing is required from the TM side to fill this up. Okay. Any question? Clear to everyone?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. Now the second part, what will come up is the building the sub-organizations, right? So we have created the company of, now we will create the selling part, purchasing part, planning part. Okay. So now I'll start with the purchasing part because I need to procure the services from the carrier. So when I have to use the purchasing part, I will create one purchase org, one purchasing group. Okay. So in order to create the purchase org and purchasing group, I again need to make sure that there are some reference units in my ECC logistics structure. So as you know, if you go into the the enterprise structure under the definition, the purchasing org is covered under logistics material management, right? Where you can see the purchasing org. So here you need to actually specify which purchasing org you want to create for your particular transportation process. Okay. So if I now go into this, now what happens here? You can link your purchasing org to your company org. Because ultimately under one company org, so this is the case where you want to set up a centralized purchasing. So there is a concept called as centralized purchasing and decentralized purchasing. Why centralized purchasing? Because I need to have a control tower set up in TM. That means I need to have one entity who is responsible for doing the transportation across different regions, different geographies globally. So in that case, if I just create one entity or one organizational structure, that should be sufficient because I want to centrally control all the planning and procurement from a particular headquarter, for example. So that is called as a centralized planning. And decentralized planning means for different regions, for different entities, you need to create multiple purchase org, purchasing group, planning org, planning group, because you are segregating the planning and purchasing across different regions and groups. So that is the difference between centralized and decentralized. So centralized advantage is that because you are controlling everything from the headquarter or head office, you have a better control on all the transportation planning, execution, negotiation with the carrier, everything is done from that. Okay. So what I will do, because my purchase org and purchasing group, sales org, sales group are linked to our organizational unit. Okay. So I will just select this company org. And then what I will do, I will select this create button. So when I select this create button, I will select line supervisor org. So why line supervisor org? Because now I created a parent-child relationship. I'm showing under one company org, I have this purchasing org. And this purchasing org will be doing the negotiation with the carrier for the rates and all. This purchasing org will be procuring the services from the carrier. You may not link to the company org, that possibility is there, but because you're working on a control tower concept, So it is always better that you link the different organizational units under one hierarchy so that you can track and trace the best the planning and the execution fields centrally. Okay. Now I'll create a purchasing org. So I just give a dummy name. Okay. So you can change the name. It's a free text. You can change. You can give any name. Okay. I'm just given a free text here. So if you want to give any name, you can give anything as of your own. And this is my purchasing org for future. Okay. And then if I go to the org data, you will see automatically an org ID is created. So this is an internal number which SAP proposes, which you can use it, or if you want to change it with an external ID, you can overwrite it as well. Okay, you can overwrite it and that will become the external ID. Now because it is a purchasing org, so my function will be purchasing and my role will be organized. Okay, so I'll just make a note of this purchasing org number. So this is my purchasing org number 855 and my company org was 854. Okay. And here I need to specify the ECC purchasing org. So my ECC purchasing org is again this part, okay, which I've created specifically for transportation process. So you need to coordinate with your ECC guy. When they are creating their own purchasing org, please tell them you segregate one purchasing org for your transportation process. Okay. And here you will see a new field called as a charge profile. So this charge profile is actually used later on when we do the charge calculation with a carrier. In order to have the charge calculation in my freight order automatically, I need to have some creation of a profile called as a charge profile. Okay, so I'll come into this profiling part later on when I come into the charge management framework. But this profile, as of now, you can keep it blank. Later on, you can always change it. And this is the city. Okay, and this is the country. Any question? Any question on the purchasing of? Clear to everyone? Okay. So the next part is we start on with the purchasing group. So what is the purchasing group? Again, purchase, you can have multiple purchase org. So in case you are doing a decentralized procurement, you can have multiple purchase org. Okay, now under purchasing org, I will create a purchasing group because I want that my purchasing group should only be linked with my purchasing org. Okay, you can again create multiple purchasing group also under one purchasing org. So in case you have one purchasing group for North Zone, South Zone, East Zone, West Zone, you can create multiple purchasing groups. But again, because I'm following the concept of a centralized purchasing, so you should link one purchase org and one purchasing group directly to the company. So how do I create my purchasing group? So in order to create a purchasing group, again, you need to coordinate with your ECC team. You need to tell them that, hey, please create one purchasing group for me. In order to create the purchasing group, I guess it is under material management. Okay. And under material management, if you go here, if you go to purchasing, under purchasing, you will create a purchasing group. Okay. So how do I create my purchasing group? So in order to create a purchasing group, you basically go here. So I select this. I select this create button. I click on line supervisor. So whenever you are creating line supervisor, it will always click higher. And here you can maintain your purchasing group. And here you can actually maintain your particular description. And if I go into the org data, here you can see this is my organizational ID for my purchasing group. And you can put this organizational ID again here. And you can click on this create button. And under the function, again, you need to specify purchasing, and under role, it should be my role. Okay. And here you need to maintain which ECC purchase org you want to use, purchasing group you want to use. Suppose I want to use STL. So you go here, and you put your business system group here. I'll show you where we create this business system group. Okay. And again, because my procurement is starting from Germany, so I can say my country, city. If you want to maintain telephone number, maintain fax, you can maintain street house, you can maintain. So this I think depends on you what data you need to maintain. Okay. And I click on save. So with this my purchasing part is done. Any question from anyone?
Well, Alok, so just curious to know, like, why we are maintaining, like, we're trying to replicate the complete org structure from ECC into TM. So this has to be done every time there's a new change, and uh, there's a chance that the address might get different. So how it is used in the process in the system?
Address may differ also, because see the thing is, suppose just think you have a single building where your second floor, third floor is your procurement department and your transport department is also on the fourth floor, but you are using the same head office. So maybe you are directly replicating or just referring to that organizational unit, but address may be different because your transportation team is sitting on the fourth floor. Just to give a very, very simple example.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I understand. But how it will be different from the ECC one? ECC will also contain the same address.
this address is actually the address what you are speaking of. This address actually has no significance in terms of sending this information to a carrier. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
okay. Because see, when you are creating a purchase order, there you know the delivery address is important. But we are not capturing this information as any communication to the carrier. The carrier is communicated about the source and the destination, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's why even if your address is different, that is not a problem here. Only thing that you should know, see, recommendation is obviously to keep the same ID, same address from ECC. That part you need to cross check because the amount of information required is not so huge. If you just put on country, postal code, city, that should also be sufficient. Okay. Or if you want to put the street house number, because it's only one entity or two entities you're creating, right? So it should not be a huge activity. So what we used to do in our implementation project, whenever we are creating such type of org unit and org structure, we first of all prepare that in an Excel template. Okay. So in the Excel, I know that, okay, these are or in a PPT format where we know that this ECC purchase or purchasing group with this street house number needs to be mapped with this TM object. So we used to create a relationship in a PPT so that you can know that, okay, this address and this address should match with each other. Even if it is not matching 100%, that's still okay. Because it is not something which you are actually transporting or transmitting this to your carrier. It is just for your information or FAQ sake. Even if you don't maintain the address, still SAP will allow you to save this. Okay.
Okay. Okay. But we have to do it every time it doesn't get replicated automatically. We have to do
It's a bit of a cut, but if you transport, the problem is the number range may be booked up. Okay. Because if you are not having the same number ranges across all clients, then when you are planning to transport, it will give an RCC error code 4. So that means you will not has not. So that's the reason why many people always do this on a as a cutover activity once all the data migration and the data content is there. Okay.
Okay.
Then we come to the next part, which is the selling part. So again, as I told you, selling part is mainly required if you are working as an LSP scenario. Okay, because in a typical shipper scenario, if you are working with HANA, you don't need to, you are not selling any service, right? You are actually procuring the service. So that's why you need to really understand for whom you are implementing TM. That is very important. Okay, because when when I started my first project, initially in SAP, if you see everywhere, they always tell sales of purchase of planning and all. But actually, there is a little bit subtle difference. If you are working in a ship, LSP scenario as compared to the shipper. I will focus both on the scenarios. But just to tell you, like when you are working for an LSP as a freight forwarder, your main core business is transportation. That's why you need to create your sales as part of that particular LSP scenario. Okay. So in case you are actually also acting as an LSP for some other entity, okay, in that case you can also create the sales office for the same company code. Again, that depends on the LOB, the line of business. If you are not doing a transportation for some other company code, then no need to actually create a sales org. But because I wanted to make you feel that yeah, we have a sales org created for the LSP scenario. That's why I'm just creating the organization unit for sales also. Or as for a shipper process, you don't need to create any sales org like that. Okay. So in order to create the sales org, what you need to do, you need to go into the organizational structure or enterprise structure. And if you go into the sales and distribution, so within sales and distribution, you will see this is the sales of distribution channel. So out of that, you need to earmark which sales org I can use for my transportation cell. Okay. Again, you need to speak with your SDT. You need to tell them, hey, I need one sales org. So again, for example, I will use this sales org. So okay, so here if I go into to create my sale log under the same company headquarters, right? So I click on this button, I click on this create, I click on this line supervisor, and if you see another parent-child relationship has come up, and here I can specify my sales org as a naming convention. So this is my sales org, okay, and this is my org data. Okay, so if I click this, I just put in my sales org initially here, and I put this number. And I put in this function. Okay. And here I can put in the business system. And again, if you see, there is a field called as the charge profile. This will keep it blank because this field will be later being used for LSP to bill the customers. Okay. For billing the customers also, you need certain profile IDs to be created in the system. So profile ID is nothing, but it actually contains the different attributes, how the calculation will be done. Okay. So I'll come into this charge profile ID later on because this is part of the charge management framework. And once you have done this, the next part what you have to do is to go to the address tab, and within the address tab you can put in again the city and the telephone code. Okay. Any question? No, using your ECC knowledge that sales office, sales group, these are never mandatory actually. But if you want to find the sales area, sales office. So I mean, before I create a sales office, I need to know the references of my ECC. So I go back, and here is my sales office. Okay. So what I will do here, I will again go here. So under sales of, I will click on this button, create button. I will click on this line supervisor. And here I will basically sales office. Okay. You can change the name, nomenclature, text, anything here. I'm just selecting sales office. So sales office for LSP scenario. In PP. Okay. And then I go to the org data. And then you have this number again. I'll put in the sales office here. Okay. So you see here, already this has been used by some other organ. So that's what I think someone asked whether it says 1:1, right? So if this is being used already, you cannot use this. Okay. So what you can do, you can use maybe the other one which I created TSUM. Okay. And this is the business system group again. And if I click on enter, you will see there is no charge calculation available for sales office. So charge profile ID is not there. Okay. And if you go into the address tab, okay. Any question? Sales office, sales group. Okay.
In org, I think in one of the tab, the first tab which you were showing, there was a staff for checkbox. So what is the use of that?
Which one?
I think the first tab, basic data, it was.
Yeah.
Staff
So this, this staff is used in case you want to assign a specific individual to a particular organizational unit ID. So suppose you are a HR. So basically this is used where this is used, for example, if you are paying a salary to a HR guy. So how will the accounts guy know he's working in the HR department, for example? So in that case, that particular assignment of that individual ID should be there for that particular department, right? So in that case, you have to put in a tick mark for staff, and the HR need to just assign it here. So you need to involve a SAP HR guy to do it if you want to basically assign a person specific organizational entity for that specific group. Or else it is not required. It is not mandatory to maintain anything here. Okay.
Okay.
So once you have created a sales office, now you know that the last part is the sales group. So under sales office, we'll have a sales group. So again, click on this. I click on line supervisor. And within the line supervisor, you see the line item came. So you can put in the sales group. Okay. And you can put in the description of the sales group. Okay. So I can click on this org data and again, this is the ID. So you see here it comes in sequence. Even if you have missed one sequence, that's not a problem. It should be 858 here. And once you have maintained this, basically you need to create your function and role. So in order to create a function and a role, you need to create on sales and you need to create on a role, which is a sales group. Okay. And when you are doing it, you can maintain the business org unit here. So for that, I need to find out the sales group. So if I go back, I need to find the sales group. Sorry. And here you can maintain the business system. Okay. Someone has been using it. Okay.
So hi Anil here. So I have a doubt. Who generally create this sales group and all? So from ECC we are taking a reference and we are putting in BSG organization. So who generally creates? Which team is responsible for creating these sales groups?
Sales group will be created by SD. You need to work with them.
Okay.
Use this. Let's go. What is this error? All unit to be keep it global ones. To be defined with one organization. State is so. So this is my sales org, which is got the sales and organization. Under this I have sales office. Okay, why did it appear? Sales office. Okay. And then after sales office, I will have sales. So now let me clear this. I go to org data. Okay. I click on this. Sales group. Okay, so someone has used this already. Now it's coming a different idea. So this is the activity you need to coordinate with your sales guy. Okay. And then you press the address tab. Okay. Any question till now? So if you see now the sales part, the purchasing part is done. So the last part which is remaining is your planning org and planning group. So as you know, planning org and planning group is something which we don't have anything in ERP, right? In ECC, we don't need to get this because in ECC, there is no planning organizational unit and planning execution group. So we don't need to link anything with reference to ECC. So if I now go to my original structure, my company org. So if you want to search any data, just click on search term and put in that ID. Okay. When you go into this ID, you'll find the company organization. So you see that with the company organization, you have purchasing org, sales org. So within the purchasing org, you have purchasing group, and within the sales org, you have the sales office, sales group. Okay. Now the last part is the planning and execution org. So again, I need to have this planning execution org with my company structure. So what I do, I click here and I click on this create button. And I click here, line supervisor org. So here there are two entities, planning execution org and planning execution group, right? Planning org and planning group. So first of all, I create a planning org. So if I create a planning org, so it's a planning execution org. I click on org data. So this is the number. Okay. And this is my particular function. So my function will be planning and execution. And my role will be, first of all, organization. And here I don't need to enter any BSG org unit because I don't need that. I click on S4X, the BSG group. I click on address tab. And within the address tab, I go to city and I go to my country. Okay. And I click on save button. So your planning execution org and planning execution group is also ready. So this planning, why it is optional? Because sometimes during the planning, we don't need to actually attribute any specific organizational unit for doing the planning. Okay, so that's the reason why you can basically live without it. Similarly, on the planning execution org, we can create another entity called as a planning execution group. So I can just create a parent-child relationship here. And the last part is this planning execution group, if you see it here. So this is the planning group. So this is the planning organization group, planning execution group. This is the org data. And this is the organizational ID. So I click on this create button. I click on this planning execution. And this, I click on this group. I don't need to enter any BSG org. And I just give the address. Clear? Any question? Is the org unit clear to everyone? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Fine. So now suppose I want to do some test that whether the org unit which has been created is correct or not. So if you see this screen, this is basically your Fiori app screen. Okay. So you can use Fiori app in order to run your transactions, day-to-day transactions. Okay. The main benefit of Fiori app is obviously the user experience. The user interface is more simple, and you can run without being in touch with the SAP GUI. Okay. So the transaction code to launch any Fiori app is basically this transaction. You can use this transaction to launch your Fiori app. UI2/FLP. So FLP is your Fiori launchpad and UI2 is the underlying framework technology which is used to launch the Fiori pads. Okay. So my main objective is to see if my organizational unit is created correctly. So suppose if I create a freight order. Okay. So if I click on this, create road freight order. So when I go to this, system will ask me to enter some organizational unit details. And within that, I can actually find out if it is created correctly or not. So I enter my freight order type. So freight order type is your document type, like it's your shipment document type. And if you go into the general data tab, in the general data tab, you see there is a section within a freight order where you need to enter the organizational data. So you can have this organizational data pre-filled based on the configuration. I will not go into details right now, but if you want to see whatever you created is correct or not, suppose I want to start with my purchase order. So I go here, I can click on this purchase order, and here there are a lot of purchasing orders. Under organizational unit ID, I put in Control V. I click in the Go button, and within the Go button, I can see the organizational ID. Similarly, if I want to see my purchasing group, see I have only one entry because that was a parent to child relationship, right? Similarly, if I want to see my execution organizational unit, so I want to see my execution organizational group. I go here. I see here. I see here. And I see on this execution group. And similarly, the last is the procuring company code. So the procuring company code is okay. And I'm saying this. So you see here, all the data which I've created is correct because system was able to find out the data in the internal database table as well. Okay. So that is how you can perform some type of testing when you are creating any new organizational units. So this is mainly related to purchasing and your planning. Similarly, if you want to check your selling part, so for that I told you for sales we need an LSP scenario, and for LSP scenario we need to basically go and check the forwarding order, right? So in order to check the forwarding order, what I can do, I can go into the order management, and here I can create a forwarding order, and I can check if my organizational unit is correctly populated here. See, this is the section for organizational unit. So what is the organizational unit for my sales org? So for sales org it's 857. So this is for my 857. I can put in my organizational unit ID here. And accordingly, because you have one entity for sales org and sales office, sales group, so automatically this data came here. And you can use this to proceed with your forwarding. Any question? Is it clear to everyone?
Yeah, we are good.
So if you see this transaction PPOCE, suppose if you want to make any change, just replace, because you know the CE nomenclature is mainly used for creation and ME is made for change. So just replace this with ME. And if you want to change anything, go to PPOME and you can change. So for example, you want to add a region. Okay, you can add a region and you can click on save. So PPOCE is for creation, PPOME is for change. Okay. And if you don't recollect the application path, don't worry, go into human resource, go into organizational management, go into organizational plan, go into staffing, and here you see create and change. So create means PPOCE and change is PPOME. Okay. And if you want to see whether this data exists in the database, so you go to a database table. So the name of the database table is HRP 1028. So this is then again an HR table you see from the starting point HR. So HR, Human Resource Personnel Management System. That is the full form. And this is the code which we use for tracking different organizational units within HR. So if I click on enter, I now need to differentiate based on what object I need to view in this table. So suppose I want to view my organizational unit. So what I do, I select O. So I go to O because why O? Because O is my organizational unit. And against my organizational unit, I can see the different organizational units which has been created in the system. Okay. Any question from anyone? I hope it's clear, right? The organizational unit.
Yeah, it is clear.
Okay. Okay. So just give me 1 minute. I just drink water and come back. Just a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So before you actually create, any type of organizational unit, okay. So one thing I just needed to tell you that there are certain basic settings which you need to actually, I would like to say validate before you start creating the organizational structure. Okay. So that is called as the system preparation activity. It is not huge, it is very less, but still you need to be sure that those are present, because if those are not working, then you will have some issues in setting up different types of processes in TM. Okay, so the first thing what you need to do is that you need to create an active version and a model. What is that? If you click on SPRO, so all these are SPRO activities, configuration activities. They are not part of any type of BC sets. If you want to update it, you need to do it manually. Okay, you go into this, go into transport management. Under transportation management, you go to master data. Under master data, you go to create active version and model. So this you need to actually run once. You don't need to run every time. So you need to create your active version. Come by 6 o'clock. Yeah. You need to create your active version and model. And for that, you need to click on this create button. And is API used? You should click on no. Okay. And you should, if you click on no, system will tell you the version model is created. So this is one-time activity. You don't need to do anything. Okay. I'll not run this because it's already being executed before. Okay. So the second thing is that you need to do the basic settings for creating the system landscape. So what does that mean? This means there is a node under this EWM, and here you need to go to HCM basis. Under HCM basis, you have integration. Under integration, you need to create the settings for your system landscape. And under the system landscape, these are different types of settings you need to do. First of all, you need to set up the logical system. So again, this is your basis activity where you need to set up the different logical system in which you are working. Okay, so basically the nomenclature should be system, client, something like that, so that it can give you an overall idea of what is the system ID and the name where you are working. So I will not create any logical system because these are all basis activities, but I just showing you because you can just later on validate if these entries exist or not. Secondly, you need to assign the logical system to the client. So whatever will be the client where you will be working. Okay, suppose I'm working in client 300 or 400 or 800, wherever. Okay, you need to specify the logical system which you have created in the previous step. The third part is you need to assign or you need to define the business system group. So this is the place. So if you remember, I was specifying S4H everywhere because this is the place where you need to assign or create your business system group. So this business system group is something like an umbrella, and within this umbrella, there are multiple logical systems you can create and you need to assign to this business system group. So this assignment to this business system group is actually done a different area. I'll show you where we do it, but you need to create a system where you're working on. Okay, and this is the answering, and this is the next one where you need to assign the logical system and queue. Here you need to assign logical. So in case you have got multiple logical system, or else SAP will not be able to create the different process documents. And here the indicator needs to be X. Okay. So in that case, you need to specify the indicator X and the release version is 700 and the queue is inbound because the sender and the receiver for transport management is coming inside. So you are the receiver recipient. So the queue type is inbound. Okay. So once you have maintained this, there is again one more configuration you need to do. So that is under your transportation management. When you go to transport management, so under transportation management, you need to have basic functions. So if you go to this, sorry, where did you go? Yeah, you go to basic functions. Under basic functions, you will have your user interface. And under user interface, you see there is another call as message settings. Please specifically for each of the ID, please maintain the message types as both because you want to view all the different types of errors, whether it's an application log error or whether, so there are two types of errors. One is called as an application log. Application log means basically whenever you are running any type of transactions, there can be some logs which is there in the database which you want to visualize it. And when you are clicking on S, which is a user interface, that means on a day-to-day level, when you are running any transaction data on the screen, if you want to have that log being captured, then you can click on user interface. So I want to do for both. So I click on both. And here I need to specify the severity. The severity should always be both error and warning message. That is all message. And the detail level is 9. So 9 is the highest level of data logging. That means all the messages which you want to have, which the system displays in the UI, you need to capture that. So that is called as a level 9. And you need to write all the logs to your DB so that in the database also these logs are getting captured. So this is one setup which you need to do. And another setup what you need to do as part of the system preparation activities is that you go to integration, and under integration again you need to define the same thing. Okay, where you need to define the business system to, and here you need to assign the the logical system to the system which remains the same. Okay, S4H to S4H. So this is what your overall preparation activity should be whenever you are actually using your transport management system. And there is one more integration within your HR master data, which the HR team will do it. But let me check if I recollect that. So again, this is the thing which your HR team will do it. Okay. So if you go into personal management, under personal management, you go to organizational management. Under organizational management, you go to your integration. Under integration, you go to integration with business partner. And under integration with business partner, you go to activate integration. So here you need to make sure that these entries are there. Activate HR integration, these entries here. If this HRSC entry is not here, then you will not be able to trigger any transactions using the HR navigation. Okay. Clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There is one more thing which you need to, so if I go into the PPT now, now the question is, where are these organizational units being used? Okay. So the organizational units which you have created basically has to be used in different application within TM. The first is your company code. So company code means basically, as you know, like company code is the highest organizational unit. Right? So here there is a separate slide called touch points. So touch points means for which transactions or for which applications these things are associated with the structure element. That's what the touch point is about. So for example, if my company code is created, it should be applicable for my payables. So that means that touch point is TCM. TCM stands for Transportation Charge Management, because it is because of the charges that the payables options are coming up, and that's why you need to have company code for booking your cost into separate books of account, right? So that's why you use company code. Similarly, if you talk about sales org, so the sales organization is again an object where you can basically use for forwarding order. The forwarding order is the business object which we generally use for LSP scenario. So use sales org in forwarding order. Then comes the purchasing org. So in the purchasing org, if you see, there are two or three business objects. One is at a freight order, one is at a freight booking, and another is a freight unit. So when I come into this freight order, freight booking, and freight unit, basically these are the three business documents where you can actually see where these particular things work out. Okay. So when I'm saying that your particular, purchasing org is applicable only for one specific purchasing or in one freight order. So when you open the freight order, you will see that particular purchasing org. Similarly, when you are opening any freight unit, so freight unit is the automatic creation which basically drives your planning process, which I had shown you just yesterday. When you are creating a sales order or delivery, don't close. At that time, the purchasing org is being used. Similarly, I have not shown you purchasing group, but anyway, the purchasing attributes are used in all these three business objects. Similarly, the planning and execution org, that is also linked to a freight order, freight booking, as well as a freight unit. So if you see the entire structure of your organizational unit, it is actually interfacing with all the processes within TM, starting from order management to planning to execution to settlement. So that's why I tell you it's a part of the internal organization structure, because all the internal processing which happens through your transactions are linked with the organization structure. And on the right hand, on the left hand side, you see the different roles. Roles means basically the person who will be executing the different transactions. They are called as the roles. So why roles are important? Because every purchasing or every procurement guy do not want to run any other transaction apart from purchasing, right? Same concept holds here. So if you are using a booking or a billing agent, you need to associate yourself for your TCM or your company code content or sales org. If you want to only perform purchasing work, that means you are a purchasing agent or you want to do an invoice verification, then the purchase org and freight order, freight booking component comes into the picture. Similarly, when you are either a planner or you are a clerk or whether you are a driver, so again, your main job is to do the planning. So that's why the linkage has to get there. So these are the different roles which you can perform. Okay, and you can restrict based on roles whether you can work across multiple entities or not. So with this, the organizational structure comes to an end. Anything, any clarification, please let me know. Clear to everyone?
So Vinod, I have one question. I mean, the company code setup that you did in the org structure as a first point, is it necessary if we are having a TM sidecar scenario?
See, the thing is, in the S4 HANA, they have done, so I'll show you one thing here so that, okay. See, basically, when I go to my freight order, this is a very new field they have brought up. Okay, so if I just close this, if I check in transport management, if I go to freight order management, if I go to freight order, so this is the document type I'm using. And when you're going into document type, you see there's a subcontracting checks where they are given two options, basic checks and no additional check. So in the older versions, they did not have these basic checks. So basic check was there, but it did not incorporate the logic of validating company code. But now what SAP has done, they wanted to check if any company wants to check for which company code also the transportation process is going around. For that, they have just changed the code a little bit and they have added the code of checking or validating company code if you are selecting basic checks. If you are selecting no additional checks, it will not validate if a company code exists or not. Okay.
Okay.
Any other question?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, is there any other org structure which is corresponding to ECC is replicated here or recreated here, like shipping point or transportation planning points?
So that is
Are they
part of the
required?
master data. That is part of the master data which we will see. But if you
Okay.
compare with the organization structure of ECC and TM, this is what we have in TM. Because in TM, we have one for procuring, one for selling, one for planning. No other thing actually is required in this case. Okay. Is the organizational structure clear to everyone? Okay. So
Yep.
I have a question for you. So suppose if I want to create an organizational structure in TM, suppose you are given an opportunity to present in a workshop. Okay, organizational structure. So how will you start off? You will not directly start creating in the system, right? So what will be your approach when you are working for any type of TM projects? How will you start off your workshop preparation for organization structure? Anything? Just tell me what you have in your mind, because the objective is to make you prepare you for the future assignments and all, right? So this is very important to know what's your way of dealing with such situation.
So Vinod, this is Ishmael. So it will be prepared as per the business segmentation. Suppose they have created company codes for each business segment, then we can go that way. Or if they want to post all the cost to one company code, separate company that is generated only for transportation, we can proceed that way also. So it's purely up to the business decision how they want to approach it. So accordingly, we create the company codes and then the purchasing groups, purchasing orgs, and I mean, suppose we're doing a shipper scenario, and then the purchasing groups. And if we want to have the staffing also, I mean, in case we have some disputes, some persons who wants to handle disputes or something similar, we can decide upon that approach.
So you are from TM team. Okay. You have your SD and your MM team also doing some workshops parallelly.
Yep.
Now, how will you approach that? How will you tell your, because see, when you are working on any transportation management workshops, you will not have the entire logistics team in your workshop, right?
Mhm.
So, so first of all, when you are presenting it, business does not know TM. In that case, if you directly tell them that, okay, I need a company code for separate codes and all, their first reaction will be, then why we are not doing the workshop together? Correct. So that is a very valid question, right? So in that case, what will be your answer? Because these are the things we have faced before in multiple clients. So I'm just trying to be a, you can say, a guide for that. How will you act? How will you work on that? So, so in that case, what will be your way forward?
I believe, the transportation specialist for that company or for whom you're doing the blueprinting or the mapping team, they'll be having their transportation specialist. So maybe the company code decision or the sales of division, company code decision, we can leave it at this moment. We can start from the purchasing of, I mean, if you want to have a purchase of for, suppose we're doing for a US, so we can have a purchase of for North America region, then the lower US region, or we want to do it for the entire US region, and then they have spread out in Europe also. We can do that way also. So, but yes, I mean, some basic, or I would say the key data structure, the mapping of the entities from the company to the purchasing group would be required if we want to do end-to-end mapping from top to bottom.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I think.
See, okay. Any other input from any other person? Any other view from any other person also? Okay. See, when you are talking about the organizational structure, so first of all, before directly arranging or coordinating with the business on the organizational structure perspective, please have a discussion with your logistics team. Try to have your workshop after the logistics team has done it. The reason I'm telling you, because ultimately this component of setting up your purchase or purchasing group responsibility lies with the logistics. Okay. Even though you have the system access and you can also create one purchase or purchasing group, but they have to be correlated with each other, right? So if you want to correlate that with each other, you should always first of all have an internal session within your team that what type of organizational structure you are going to present to the client. So you have to have an organizational structure, internal setup discussion with your finance, with your procurement, with your selling. Now my procurement and selling tells me, yeah, I need one, suppose 2 or 3 org structure based on some scenarios, or my procurement team tells me, okay, for direct procurement, for indirect procurement, for subcontracting, for STO, okay, I need some certain organizational structure set up and all. So you need to understand that, and you need to tell them, okay, if you are having so much organizational structure, now just keep that in mind that we are going to create this organizational structure for my TM. You don't need to create in the system first of all, because first of all, you need to have an input from your internal team. What are they planning? Then you start the workshop of TM. Then you tell them, okay, this is the logistics enterprise structure, which is as per the discussion with my MM and SD counterpart. And then as far as my requirement goes, because so in that case, first of all, you have to ask them whether you want to go with a centralized or decentralized plan. That is a very, very important question, because directly if you start creating only one, and later on if you find that they are into multiple entities, multiple geographical regions, that is not going to help, right? Because the first impression is the last impression, right? So you have to ask them how is the business thinking in setting up the transportation tower? Whether the transportation tower will cater to the requirement for all the X or Y or Z number of regions, geographies centrally, or is it that each of the entity, each of the region, each of the geography will have their own particular setup? So this means, like for example, if you are implementing TM, for example, for a big CPG industry, where they are currently rolling out the SAP solution to about 50 countries. So but the headquarters is in US. So whether they want to have different planning for all those 50 geographical regions separately, or whether the planning should be controlled and coordinated centrally from US, that is the first question you should ask them before even proposing anything. Because if they say, no, my tower, I need a centralized planning, which we all sometimes call as a control tower concept. The control tower means the centralized guy is responsible and is monitoring all the transportation which is happening throughout globally. So if you are using the control tower concept of centralized planning, then half of your job is done. Then you just need to create one organizational unit which can be of any nomenclature, and that you can propose it to your client. But if they say no, I need to have separate planning entities, separate purchasing entity. In that case, you need to group the entities, because if you are having 50 entities, it does not make sense to have 50 purchasing group. It will be a bad design, because if you are doing planning for 50 entities, you can see what is the amount of load you will have in the system. Okay. I have seen a client who are quite, immature in their design, irrespective of a suggestion they did not follow, and now they are all struggling because they now decided to group them into regions and entities. So does anyone know what is the meaning of entity? Anyone has heard about this word entity-wise planning? What do you mean by, I'm speaking of the word entity here? What do you feel? What is the meaning of entity?
An org unit?
It's not an
Like
org
company,
unit.
it's like a company code.
Okay.
Shares of.
So, no, I'll not tell in that way. So entity, yeah, okay. If I speak from SAP perspective, you're right. It's an org unit. But if I see from a business perspective, so what I see, like for example, suppose your company has the regional centers, one in Sweden, one in Finland, one in, for example, in UK, one in Switzerland. So that means you are having 4 different entities for these 4 different regions. And each of the entity or each of the region is doing a planning separately. So if you can understand, if a particular company is having 50 such regions or geographical areas specially done, you have to do planning 50 times. You have to create planning 50 entries for that, which is not a very ideal solution for any type of transportation process. So in order to overcome that part, we generally try to make it little bit on a thinner level, so that you don't plan for 50, but we try to club them. Clubbing means you are trying to consolidate the planning with little entities. So instead of 50, maybe you will have 10 or 15 entities, but that will still reduce the amount of effort you are putting in for doing the planning and all. Okay. So that's why that is the first thing you have to do when you are entering into any such type of workshop. Directly don't propose anything. Try to get their input and propose that. Okay. And once you are, once you are done with that proposal, or once you are done with an agreement that, okay, this is the amount, this is the amount, a number of entities I'm going to use and all, then you have to have an internal workshop again with your cross-process teams, SDMM and all, where you need to tell them, okay, based on the discussion, based on the flows, this is what I require, and you please need to prepare one form. Or in case you have based on the segregation of duties, if you have the access, you can also create your own organizational units but you please create something of a proper code, a proper nomenclature. Okay, so that it will help you to identify for which reason you are creating your organizational unit. Okay, any question on this? Is it clear to everyone what I intended to say?
So, Vinod, is there any standard SAP recommendation or a best practice? I mean, if a customer asks why you're asking us to lower down the entities, and if we have a concern regarding to planning or processing or maybe the loading the server, we can have a different time for each planning each region order. So, why do you want to restrict them?
No, the restriction is first of all to nullify the creation of huge number of data. That is the first thing, because even if you are not creating the data same time, the load on the server depends on the number of entries in the system, right? So even if you are doing, suppose for India planning, if you are doing it now and after 1 hour you are doing for European planning, anyway the amount of data which you are creating in server is going to multiply by 2, right? Okay, so that is first thing. Second thing, if you are creating too much of entities, controlling becomes very difficult, because each of the planner, each of the what you say, like the organizational entity will try to use their own way to run a process. So in that case, the central or the head office will lose its control, right? If you understand, if you have got 50 entities and if each of them is doing the planning and execution settlement in a different way, you can understand what will be the scenario of the system. Can please someone go on mute, please? I think someone, yeah, sorry, thanks. So in case you are allowing this to happen, it will actually stop you to have a proper control on the entire transport mechanism. Okay, and like in SAP, you should always try to have a grouped approach. So when I say a group approach means basically you should try to have a best practice approach so that it can be rolled out to the other sites and entities accordingly, right? So you need to have a proper template definition clearly, and then it can be rolled out to some other sites. So obviously system performance can be an issue, and also another is the controlling is another issue. So try to minimize as much as possible the creation of all these organizational units and structure.
Okay, thanks, Vinod.
And also the final impact what we will have is also on the payables part. Why payables? Because as I told you, if you are not centralizing it, different countries will have different medium terms of payment. Different carriers will come. Sometimes I have seen in one project where the carrier was serving 2 different countries with 2 different payment terms, and those countries were quite very near to each other. And when the payables team found out, it was a nightmare for them, because the country-wise differentiation based on payment terms was becoming too much for the payables team to actually follow that and keep that in their system. Okay, same carrier but 2 different payment terms. Yeah, it was followed in that way, because different countries had to have different types of agreement process and all. So from the perspective of planning as well as from the perspective of managing the cost and all these things, it may have an impact. So try to reduce as much as data as possible. Okay. Any other question from anyone? Okay. So now if you see the flow, what I have covered yesterday, okay. So we started with the organization structure, and like in standard ECC also, once an organizational structure comes to an end, we start with the master data. So I will just give an overview on the master data. We'll start with the master data tomorrow. But these are the different types of master data. So can you tell me why master data is required? What is the usage of master data? Why do you feel master data has to be mandatory be specified? Anyone? Just to understand, all of you understand that. Yeah.
To avoid repetitive entering of data and centralized maintenance.
Okay. Yes, you're right. So master data has to be is important because unless a master data is there, you will not be able to execute any transaction data. That is a simple word. So it is very important to know what are the different types of master data. So in transport management, there are a lot of master data. But the best part is that not all master data are used. Okay, it differs from business to business. It differs from client to client. So I cannot say that there is any best practice which you need to adopt, whether this particular master data should be there or not. So if you see here, there is a master data called as a business partner, master data called as a equipment type, master data called as a product, transportation network, resource, schedules, default routes. Okay, so out of this, the mandatory master data required is obviously, business partner, because unless a carrier is there, you cannot execute transportation. The next mandatory master data is product. So why product? Because in case you don't have a product, obviously what will you transport? You don't have anything to transport. So that is a cargo item which needs to be transported is captured as a product. This is the most important thing. This is a huge gamut which I'm talking about network. So within the transport network, I have location, I have transportation zone, I have transportation lane, I have transshipment points. So if you see here, I've already specified what is there in your transportation network. So this is the entire skeleton of your transportation plan. So if you are not setting up your network, if you are not knowing from where to where your transport is moving or planning to move, then you cannot set up a network. And if your network cannot be set up, obviously your planning will go wayward. Then, so transportation, but out of this, location is mandatory, zone is mandatory, lane is not mandatory. Lane is only used in case you want to do automatic planning. If you want to do manual planning, you don't need lane fetching. Resource. I will come across to this word transshipment a little bit later. Resource. Resource is mandatory because without the resources, you will not be able to move your product, right? So I should know what is the capacity of my product or cargo which I'm transporting, and I should also know that, okay, my specific capacity of a resource is actually matching that cargo capacity or exceeding that. So if in case your cargo capacity is 100 tons and if your resource capacity is 80, it is not going to help you. And the final part is a default route. So in the default route, please don't confuse this with the route what we use in ECC. There is no relation between them. So these two objects which you see, schedules and default route, these are not mandatory for TM. Okay. So unless the master data is set up, you cannot run any of these processes. This process which has broken up order management, planning, execution, settlement. This can only be working, this will only be in working condition provided your master data setup is there. So for the master data setup, there are two approaches which you generally take. So there are two types of master data. One is your global master data and another is your local master data. So when we talk about local master data, we talk about like schedules, resource, default routes. So these are called as the local master data because they don't have the presence in ECC. You can create this data independent of ECC. But when I'm talking something about product, when I'm talking something about business partner, okay, this has to come from ECC because as I told you, when my freight unit is created, it is always a single stage with shipping point as a source location and destination as my customer ship to party. So in order to create a ship to party and a shipping point, these are all ECC objects. Now SAP Transportation Management, if you are working in S/4HANA, okay, the shipping point and the customer location can be created using a specific report. But if you are using a standalone, so for standalone, we need to use a framework called as a CIF framework, which is called as a CIF technology, CIF. So that's CIF technology is used to transfer your master data from your ECC to TM if you are using standalone. But if you are using S/4HANA, we don't use SIF. We directly use that report to directly create the particular master data in your TM system. In addition to that, in case you are actually, so this business partner, if you remember, is a concept in S/4HANA. So whether it's a customer or vendor, whatever you want to actually use in your ECC application, that is your business partner in your S/4HANA landscape. Okay. So whenever you're creating a business partner in your SAP S/4HANA landscape, please note the business partner is owned by both MM and SD. The only thing from TM perspective, what we need to do is to enhance the role of a carrier. So that means once you are creating your vendor role, you just need to add an additional role called as a carrier. And that carrier role is only thing what we want for TM. We don't need to do any other setup for business partner because either the business partner setup will be done by the data migration team or it will be taken care by your SD and MM team because business partner mainly pertains to your customer vendor. Okay. So this is all about your master data concept, and every master data which is created in SAP Transport Management is used in different applications. Like you can use master data setup in freight unit creation, freight order creation, freight booking, settlement, everywhere. There is another master data which I have not spoken of, which is not here, is called as a service master. So service master is used whenever you will be creating a service PO and service NQ sheet. We need a service master. So that service master needs to be linked with a charge in order to create your service purchase order when the FSD is posted. So that is another master data which you need to create, and we need to assign it in our configuration node so that it works our way. Any question from anyone? Okay, so I think with this we'll stop today here, and tomorrow we'll start with the master data part. Any question from anyone?
No, nothing from my side.
Okay. Okay, then we'll speak tomorrow again.
Thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to ask your questions in the comment section below, and we will reply to them at the earliest.